Another question you asked was about process theodicy. So for about 1800 years, Christians, borrowing from Greek and Latin philosophy, talked about God as being. But around the middle of the 19th and into the 20th century, some Christians began to talk about God not as being, but as about becoming. I'm sitting in our churchyard at early St. Peter's. Look all around me, and you'll see this is a place which changes through the course of the year. Leaves grow and fall, flowers bud, blossom, and then fade away again. The grass grows and then fades in the summer. Process theology talks about God a bit like that just as the natural world changes and grows and goes through cycles, so they thought God did as well. That God changed and grew and went through at different cycles of God's life. And in the middle of the 20th century, some Christian theologians began to think about the idea of process theology as a way of accounting for the problem of evil. They said that God, like the trees and the grass and indeed human beings, went through change and suffering himself, and so God could sympathise, could be in solidarity with those who were themselves suffering. This became particularly prevalent in theology after the Second World War. I'm sitting in front of our war memorial, the white stone cross behind me. The experience of two world wars led many Christian thinkers, particularly in countries affected by war, to think about God as suffering with us, and the God of process theology helped them to give reasons and an account of that. So particularly we think of Jürgen Moltmann, who was a German thinker writing in the wake of the war and of course the Holocaust. Kitamori, who was a Japanese theologian who was heavily influenced by the experience of the atomic bombings in Japan, and also later some black theologians like James Cone in America, who thought that the suffering of black people on account of racial injustice was an argument for saying that God suffered and changed with human beings and with the whole of creation. So they particularly paid attention to Jesus suffering and dying on the cross, and said that there we saw not God who was just being, but God who was becoming, God who was changing and suffering almost in sympathy with you and me as we changed and suffered. So that's what's meant by process theodicy.